Worst comes to worst, we'll just let it go. But worst comes to worst, we'll just let it go. But okay. Hopefully, I have figured it out. Um, if that's the end of our technical problems, we'll just get started. So Senator McBride, would you mind introducing yourself before we hop into things?
Sure. My name is Sarah McBride. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. You all can call me Sarah. I probably should have said that before you all introduced yourselves. But I am really excited to be here. I am the brand new state senator for Delaware's first state Senate district.
So nice to meet you. So thank you, everyone. Sarah, we're so excited to have this conversation and to learn more about your story. We'll be speaking tonight in the question and answer format. So Krista will start us off, and then I'll just continue to call on people. So Krista, if you want to get us started.
How did you first get into politics?
So my own journey as a trans person actually very much coincides with my journey into politics. As a young person, as I began to become aware of the fact that there was something about me that other people in society didn't accept, that there was something about me that would result in barriers to opportunity, to community, to fulfillment, to love, to happiness for no other reason but my own identity. I began to wonder what my place in the world looked like, and I began to fear for my future. But I found hope in reading the history books. I found hope in the story of every single chapter in those history books being the story of advocates, activists, everyday citizens, and elected officials with the courage to act, who work together to deepen our understanding of we the people, to expand equality and opportunity for more people. And I think that is the through line in the American story. I think it's the through line in our history as a humanity, that for all the sins and for all the challenges in our history and in our present, that the story of our country and the story of our people is the story of a widening circle of opportunity. And I found a lot of hope in that. And I saw that politics was the place where you can make the most amount of change for the most number of people in the most number of ways possible. And so I got involved. I got involved at a really young age. The first campaign I actually volunteered on, sort of, I was 10 years old. A neighbor was running as an independent candidate for mayor in the city that I grew up in. But then I got really involved when I was about 13, working for a candidate for statewide office here in Delaware, volunteering for them. And I think for me, that motivation in part was seeing that politics could be an avenue to create more space for people like me to live fully and freely in our society. And the feeling that even if I couldn't live authentically, even if I couldn't live openly, that perhaps by making a difference in my community, by making my family proud, by making a change in this country, that those things would help to fill the void in my life and heal the pain in my life of living an authentic life. But it wasn't until I was actually in college that I gained the courage, confidence, and insights to realize that as fulfilling as making change was, it wouldn't actually heal that pain and it wouldn't fill that void. And that the only way to actually have a meaningful life is at the start to have an authentic life.
Thank you so much. I read your book actually, and I was reading the first chapter, and that was really interesting. Who's next? Just raise your hand and you want to go. Go ahead, Jack.
So my question was, how did you feel about your gender identity as a young child?
You know, I think one of the challenges for folks who aren't, for cis folks, for folks who aren't trans, that is different than for folks who are straight, is that most people who are straight can understand what it feels like to love and to lust. And so they're able to enter into conversations around sexual orientation with a similar experience. Most people who are cisgender don't have that analogous experience to having a gender identity that differs from your sex assigned at birth. And for me, the closest thing that I could compare it to of being in the closet as a trans person was a constant feeling of homesickness, sort of that unwavering ache in the pit of my stomach that would only go away when I could be seen and affirmed as myself. You know, growing up, though, that pain, it grew with time, but it also seemed like my dreams and my identity were mutually exclusive. And in many ways, changing the world seemed more possible than being myself. And so I kept it buried deep inside, but it was a fact I ended up thinking about every single waking hour of every single day. And in coming out, I think the thing that was most profound for me was that my mind was free to think about other things, that my mind and my whole self was free to feel and pursue every emotion. It was a suffocating experience in many ways, but I was lucky. I was lucky that I was able to come out at a relatively young age. I was 21. I was able to come out to a loving family and a supportive campus. It was 2011, 2012. So it was really before, I mean, I went to a campus that was known for being inclusive of gay, lesbian, and bisexual students, at least cis gay, lesbian, bisexual, and queer students. But there really wasn't examples of my campus being accepting and embracing of trans students, because there was maybe one out trans student on my campus of like 6,000 people. I mean, that's how much things have changed in just the last 10 years. That seems completely ridiculous now, but there really weren't that many examples. But I was fortunate to be at a campus that did respond to my coming out in a really positive way, but there weren't many examples, and it's hard to be what you can't see. So I kept it all inside, and it was hard, but it was relatively easy compared to the experiences that so many other people have, including so many other trans people.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously I'm a cisgender person. I haven't had that experience of what you described of the homesickness, but it's, yeah, it definitely sounds exhausting to have to just be thinking about that all the time. And it must have been very hard for you to do the work you did in politics as a young person, because, it would be just so hard to focus on other things.
Yeah, and it, in some ways, politics was a distraction from those feelings. Part of it was a channeling of those feelings, but yeah, it was exhausting. And I'm a determined person, but on the little things, I can be a lazy person. And so it was definitely very, it was consuming. It was all consuming. And it was, you talk about exhausting, not just having them after coming out, not just having the mental space to think and pursue other things, but to just have the energy to do so I was like, wow, this is how other people live. This is how most other people feel all the time. And they've always felt this way. That was revelatory and truly a surprise.
Yeah, I can absolutely imagine. Raise your hand for the next question. Bella, go ahead.
So was it scary when you first made your decision to come out?
It was frightening. I thought I was giving up any future. I thought with that single sentence that any life I dreamed of would be impossible. So impossible that it was truly almost incomprehensible. The idea that you could be trans and out, the idea that you could be trans out and find love and be loved, the idea that you could be trans out and embraced by your community, the idea that you could be trans out and find professional fulfillment, let alone professional fulfillment in a role elected by a community, that seemed so impossible it was incomprehensible. And so when I came out, I gave up on any future. I gave up on any feeling that there was a remote possibility for the things that I hope to do in my life. But I had to do it. There was no choice. And in coming out very quickly, I saw that while my fears were understandable, they were unfounded. And I saw very quickly that the only things that are truly impossible are the things that we don't try. And in many ways, running for office for me was the byproduct of 10 years of seeing that from coming out onward, that our ability to bring about change and that politics and advocacy and government at its best is not the art of the possible, but the art of transforming what once seemed so impossible that it was incomprehensible, not just into possibility, but into reality. And so I was scared, but in many ways, I'm actually grateful for how scared I was, because I've been able to compare that fear and that perspective with the reality of what I've seen over the last 10 years. And so anytime I feel down, anytime I feel like the odds are too impossible, I just think back to that period of time and think back to the fact that if the last 10 years was possible for as impossible as I thought it was, then anything is truly possible.
So for you, it just ultimately came down to deciding between your future and being yourself, and you just had to make that choice for yourself.
Yeah, I think something that a lot of young people are increasingly grappling with, especially young queer and trans folks, are these like deep existential questions about like what is a life worth living? What is an authentic life? What is a meaningful life? And I grappled with that at an early age. And like I said, for a while, the sort of what would I want at the end of my life to look back upon, my sense of what the meaningful life would have been won out over my sense of what an authentic life would have been. But over time, it became clear that you can't have that meaningful life without that authentic life. And that at its core, a life worth living is a life rooted in truth and happiness and joy. And those were only possible if I lived authentically as myself.
Yeah, for sure, completely. Next question, raise your hand. Go ahead, Alice.
Hi, so I was wondering, what was it like to intern in the Obama and Biden White House?
It was incredible. It was unbelievable. When I talk about that journey since coming out and this sort of process of recognizing that things that I thought were impossible were possible, that included working at the White House. I started there. My first day was 3 months after I came out publicly as transgender in my student newspaper. And to be able to walk into that building with an ID that reflected my name and my gender, to walk in there and be welcomed into the White House as my authentic self, and to not just be welcomed in as a guest, but as someone who was working in there day in and day out, was a reflection of our capacity to change, and a reflection of the important fact that our voices can matter. When we have the right people in government, when we elect the right leaders, we can have a table that includes all of us. And in having a table that includes all of us, we can actually craft and implement the solutions that meet the full needs of a diverse community. And I worked in what was called the Office of Public Engagement, which was sort of termed the front door of the White House. And the reason for that was it was the office that worked with all the different communities across our country, not geographic communities per se, but the LGBTQ community, the Black community, Latinx community, women, people of faith, you name it, any community that in any way has ever sort of been on the outside. That office's role was to work with those communities, to bring them in, to bring them into the White House, and to share a little bit about what the administration was doing on behalf of their fight for opportunity and dignity, and to hear more about what the administration could do to better their lives. And anytime, it's hard to get jaded, but every once in a while you're so consumed with the work that you're doing, you forget where you are. And anytime you fall into that trap, you easily get out of it when you are in a meeting with the folks that are coming in, when you're bringing them into I remember bringing folks into a meeting in the Roosevelt room of the White House, of the West Wing, which is the meeting room right next to the Oval Office, with the door to the Oval Office open, bringing folks in to meet with the President of the United States, and seeing folks who throughout their entire lives never saw the people's house as their house, to feel at home there, to be welcomed in there, to be contributing members around that table, members of our democracy around that table, and to meet there, not just with the President of the United States, but with our nation's first Black president. Anytime you forgot where you were, you would instantly be reminded of the awesome opportunity and the awesome responsibility of being even an intern in that kind of space. And so for me, it was a reminder that if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. I saw how just being trans and in that space changed conversations and deepened priorities, made issues no longer abstract, but made them real and tangible for people. And it was that first moment of a real professional recognition that I could be trans and my voice could matter and I could have a seat at the table.
Yeah, I mean, it must have just been so incredible to just get to be surrounded by such a revolutionary presidency while just experiencing something so revolutionary yourself. Next question, raise your hand. Go ahead, Mallory.
So what was it like campaigning for the state Senate?
Well, it was definitely not a normal experience since we were campaigning in the midst of a global pandemic. I was lucky that I started my campaign in July of 2019. So I was out there knocking on doors well before COVID hit. The thing that I think struck me more than anything else was just how much I enjoyed running for office. If you want to fall more deeply in love with the community that you live in, run for office, win or lose. Because the people that you meet and the conversations that you have will either educate you or reinforce for you, or a mix of both, not just the issues in your community, but the inherent goodness of the people in your community. Right now in our politics, it's really easy to feel demoralized and to question whether we have in us what it takes to live up to our better angels. But when you run for office and you go door to door and you see just how much we have in common, and you see just how much we share in our hopes and our dreams and our fears, when you have those conversations rooted in kindness and compassion day in and day out, it shows you how good your neighbors are. It shows you that there is that foundation of goodness that is necessary for us to push forward meaningful policies and deliver real change. And it shows you how lucky you are to live in that community and to call those people neighbors. So running for office for me, I did it because I was hopeful. I did it because I saw that change is possible. But finishing that campaign on November 3rd, I finished it more hopeful than I was at the start of it. And that was because quite literally the conversations I had left me deeply moved and profoundly changed.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked to Senator Kyle Evans-Gay a few weeks ago, and she said the same thing about how it just was such a not normal experience in the world of campaigning, and it wasn't comparable to anything she had seen or worked on before, but she loved every minute of it.
Yeah, so. And actually Senator Gay and I have talked about this, where it's like people ask us for our advice and we're like, we don't know, because we campaigned in hopefully what will be a once in a century kind of campaign. And I think both of us are eager to campaign in a world where we can go back on the doors safely. Because those conversations, people were really great on the phones, don't get me wrong. People were very graceful and tolerant with us cold calling them, but there is nothing like an in-person conversation. And I can't wait to be able to have that opportunity again.
Yeah, for sure. Next question, raise your hand. Go ahead, Sean.
Well, my question is, how monumental does it feel to be the first openly trans senator? And do you feel like any burden on your shoulders with that?
You know, I always say I didn't run to make headlines. I ran to make a difference in this community. And, you know, when you're running for office, and even as you're serving, you know, you're focused on the job that's in front of you. You're not sort of thinking about even the history that could be made or has been made. You're focused in the course of the campaign on talking to as many voters as possible. I'm focused in this job on serving my constituents, you know, handling constituent relations that are coming in, passing and drafting legislation, you know, tackling the major issues of our time, making sure we're getting the vaccine out as efficiently, effectively, and equitably as possible. But there are moments where something happens and you're reminded of the incredible opportunity and responsibility that I have in this office. Obviously, first and foremost, that responsibility and opportunity is to make change for the constituents of the 1st Senate District. And the only way I can do justice by the LGBTQ community is to be the best state senator I can be for this district. But I am mindful of, one, the message that an election of a trans person to a seat like this can have for a trans person here in Delaware or elsewhere around the country, in showing them that our democracy is big enough for them too, that the heart of our country can be big enough to love them as well. And I know how much of a difference that would have made in my own life growing up. I know how much of a difference it would make, and at the same time, I almost can't anticipate how much of a difference it would have made had I seen that headline, had I seen that news story. And so I feel grateful that I'm able to be part of something like that, that while I didn't run for that purpose, and while the real work started in January, that we were able to achieve something in and of itself by winning the election and sending that message, which for a young person, no matter the slurs they heard around the dinner table, no matter the names they were called on the playground, that message can be life-saving. And at the end of the day, I feel very strongly, though, that it doesn't matter if I'm the first, if I'm also the last. And that my job is to do the best job I can for the constituents here in this district, but in so doing, not just leaving a Sarah-sized hole in the wall, but taking this moment and this office to help break down all of the barriers that stand in the way of people in living full, authentic, free lives and being able to fully participate in our society, including in our democracy and in running for office. My hope is, though, that we get to a point where it's not noteworthy that a trans person gets elected to public office, where we recognize that diversity in government is not a luxury, but a necessity for a healthy democracy, and where that diversity is so commonplace that it's not noteworthy. And I believe we'll get there. I do. But until we do, I do think it's important that we celebrate the advancements we make, that we amplify the possibility models, because that can make a difference for people. And like I said, it's hard to be what you can't see. But once you see it, you know that for that trans youth, the sky is the limit. And that's one of the reasons why it was important for me when I got sworn in. The people who were holding the Bible were 2 trans girls, 2 trans teens. And to be able to put my left hand on the Bible and my right hand in the air and swear a constitutional oath prescribed to me and to my colleagues and to every single elected representative and official in this state, to do so looking at and being sworn in by the first openly LGBTQ judge in our state with a Bible held by 2 trans teens, that's an image I'll never forget. And it's an image that reflects how far we've come.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Like in the since you came out, there has been so much change in that area. Like just the fact that there were 2 transgender youth and they're not hard to find anymore. Like people are becoming more comfortable with themselves and their gender identity. And like, I mean, I know trans youth, like it's something that it's becoming so much more normalized, which I think is really cool to witness. I think we're in a very like fast changing time period right now of history.
I think that's right. And Mallory, I think you sort of called me old there. But no, it's true. I mean, I'm not, I'm 30 years old, and all jokes aside, the speed of change we've seen over the last 10 years has been monumental. Now, of course, it's the byproduct of generations of work, of generations of people who never lived to see this progress, to see this day. But the change we've seen has been monumental, and in the course of the last 10 years has been significant and quick. And you know, you read my book, and you know that one of the things that provides me with probably the most level of hope and optimism is the fact that trans youth exist today, that they are both out and dreaming big dreams all at the same time. And so it was a privilege to be able to share that moment that day with them.
Yeah, it's just, I didn't call you old, by the way.
No, I know, I'm just joking. I'm just joking.
Okay, next question, raise your hand. Go ahead, Megan.
Before I ask my question, I just want to say that like you are such an inspiration, and thank you so much for everything that you're going to do and everything that you have done. But my question is, do you think that we are going to see more transgender people being elected into office soon?
Absolutely. I think it's no coincidence that we have seen the number of out trans elected officials grow almost exponentially over the last 3 years. You know, we saw the election of Danica Rome in 2017, Philippe Cunningham and Andrea Jenkins in Minneapolis. The Minneapolis City Council, 13-member city council, 2 of their 13 members are 2 Black trans people. What an incredible, I mean, just what an incredible fact. But it's no coincidence that happened in 2017. And then in 2018, we saw 3 more trans state legislators elected. And then in 2020, we saw 3 or 4 more on top of that we've continued to grow that caucus of out trans legislators. I think we're going to continue to see that progress. And I think we're going to see that progress grow exponentially. Because again, once someone shows that it's possible, you know, it doesn't just impact one person. It impacts hundreds, if not thousands of people who see that, who then run for office. And of those hundreds that run for office, you know, eventually dozens will win. And then eventually more and more and more. And so every single person who runs, and not just wins, anyone who runs sets forth a ripple effect that multiplies, not just adds, the number of people that are running. So I do think we'll see more. My hope, though, and I think the work ahead of us, is to make sure that the more that we see more fully reflect the full diversity of the community. Stephanie Byers is the first trans a Native American legislator. Right now, there are no out trans Black legislators at the state level. There are, like I mentioned, on city councils, but none at the state level. So we need to make sure that we're electing more of that diversity. Marie Turner in Oklahoma is the first non-binary legislator. We need to see more non-binary legislators and more non-binary candidates. So I think the goal here is not just that exponential growth, it's got to be growth that reflects the full diversity of the communities.
For sure. Next question, raise your hand. Go ahead, Kate.
My question to you is, you know, you've mentioned in the past how people, you know, you had people seeing you as different, or like you didn't feel that you fit in. My question is, do you ever have fears being elected that people will see you differently or you will be treated differently? Yeah,
I mean, I don't have fears. It's true. That happens. You can't, I mean, politics and government is a reflection of society. And there's no question that I am treated differently. There's no question that if you are a person with any marginalized background, you can say the exact same words as someone else who's white, straight, cisgender, and a man, and you will be perceived as more radical than they are. Even if you're saying literally the exact same thing, even if you are pushing the exact same policies, no matter what, you will be seen as more radical. There's no question that there are obviously more barriers in the way of candidates who are from marginalized backgrounds. Barriers that are obvious, like higher levels of poverty and higher levels of unemployment and all of the sort of structural barriers that get in the way of people pursuing any kind of career advancement and economic opportunity in politics or outside. But then, of course, barriers because people are skeptical about whether candidates like them can win, whether they're competitive, which, again, I think is clearly disproven time and time again. Whether we're talking about trans candidates, whether we're talking about women, whether we're talking about folks of color, no matter the identities we're talking about, it's clear that those candidates can run and win and be competitive. I'm mindful that anytime I talk about trans rights, even if I've spent 99% of my time talking about issues other than trans rights or LGBTQ equality, the moment I bring it up, everyone goes, oh, there she goes. She's just serving as an LGBTQ senator. She's just focused on trans rights. So I have to be mindful of that as I engage in my advocacy and in my job, of the recognition that literally just saying a word once, because people are just so, that's how people see me, the trans state senator, that if I bring it up, then they go, that's all you're focused on. Even though that every single piece of legislation I'm working on is much broader. I will say, though, during the course of the campaign, the challenges I faced had to do more with my youth and my gender than in my gender identity. I think I was lucky as a trans candidate that I didn't really face many people saying you can't win. A lot of other candidates do. What I did face was skepticism from people, not the traditional gatekeepers, but certainly folks that I would meet who would think simply because I was young and a woman, not even trans, that I would be too radical to get things done, that I wouldn't be able to work with other people, that I'd be a bomb thrower and never a bridge builder. Those types of assumptions about how young people engage and the universalizing of those tactics and strategies that, okay, you're a young woman running for office. That means you aren't going to be able to be bipartisan in any way. You're not going to be able to work with other people. You're not going to be pragmatic. You're not going to ever be willing to compromise. And so are you sure that you can do this job effectively? I think that was sometimes something that I faced. Again, though, I don't want to lose the forest for the trees. For all of those challenges, for all of the biases that sometimes I interact with, at the end of the day, voters in this district demonstrated that they're fair-minded people who are looking at candidates based on their ideas and their experiences. And if that weren't true, then the results would not have been the results that happened in September and November. And so, for all the challenges, I don't want to ever come close to shortchanging the goodness of my neighbors and the fact that they are fair-minded and were willing to look at me and say, we want you because of your experience, because of your ideas, because of your policies. And frankly, to the degree that your identity matters, it matters because we're excited to have more diversity in government. And that's what I saw on the campaign trail. And I think that's what the results reflect.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on no way at the same level, but I think as young people who are active in advocacy and activism, we've all seen similar effects of, being called just so radical because of our age or our gender. And I think it's something that it's very prominent, like in any way.
Well, and we should be bold, right? Like we should feel the fierce urgency of now. We should be bold. We should have big ideas. We should pursue those big ideas. But this notion that boldness and an ability to get things done are mutually exclusive, because my policies were bold, but I do also know that I can work with people. My instinct is to be a bridge builder. and that presumption of not just what your positions are, but your inability then to engage in effective change making, I think is not only wrong and misguided, but demonstrably untrue, because we know that the people who have driven change, not just now, but in history books, are oftentimes young people. It was a young Harriet Tubman who forged the Underground Railroad. It was a young John Lewis who helped lead protesters across a bridge in Selma. It's been young people who've opened hearts and changed minds on issues like marriage equality. And so the irony is that for all the biases against young people in thinking that they aren't effective change makers, history bears out that young people are oftentimes the most effective change makers.
Yeah, for sure. All that makes a lot of sense. Raise your hand. Next question. Go ahead, Lex.
How do you think your experience with grief has shaped you into the person you are today?
So the most profound experience in my life was my relationship with my late husband. And for those who don't know the story or haven't heard the story, I met the man who would become my future husband, Andy, actually at the White House. We met at a White House Pride reception. More accurately, we bumped into each other. I don't remember that moment, but he remembered that moment, and he reached out to me actually with a Facebook message where he said that he thought we should get together because he thought we'd get, quote, along swimmingly. And I was like, who the hell says the word swimmingly in their 20s? But clearly someone I want to spend some time with. So we started dating. Andrew Cray was his name. He was a transgender man. He was about 2 years older than me. He was an advocate and specifically focused on expanding access to healthcare for more people, including more LGBTQ people. He was brilliant, funny, kind, thoughtful. More than anything else, he was goofy, which is what I loved about him. About a year into our relationship, he was diagnosed with cancer, and he was lucky to have insurance, and we were able to get the care he needed. He went through radiation, chemotherapy, incredibly extensive surgery, and he got a clean bill of health. And then about 8 months after that, he developed a cough that didn't go away. And we found out that it was actually his cancer, that it had returned and it had spread to his lungs. And that for him, it would be terminal. And when we found that out, he asked me to marry him. I said yes, of course. 3 weeks after he got the terminal diagnosis, we married on the rooftop of our apartment building. And then 4 days after that, he passed away. And like I said, that relationship, my relationship and loving Andy changed me forever. He taught me how to love and be loved. He taught me how to live the values I fight for at work in my own life, the values of kindness and compassion and care. He also taught me that change can't come fast enough. I talked about that fierce urgency of now and the recognition, I think, in my grief and in that experience, the recognition of the urgency of change was one that I carry, is a recognition I carry with me every single day now, that when we're asking people to sit back and allow for a slow conversation to take place before they're treated with dignity and ensured opportunity, we're asking people to watch their one life pass by without the fairness that everyone deserves. And that is too much to ask of anyone. The other thing that I only realized, I think, after his passing is something that I've been thinking a lot about over the last year with COVID, which is what in the last month of Andy's life, my brother, who's a doctor, who's a cancer doctor, said to me, this is going to be incredibly difficult, but that I should take stock in the acts of amazing grace that would fill my life in that last month of Andy's life. And that grace was everywhere. from our family and friends organizing a wedding for us in 5 days, to Andy living long enough to get married. And what that experience taught me is that all of us, even in the darkest moments and the most troubling times, we can all bear witness to acts of amazing grace. And that hope as an emotion and hope as a phenomenon, hope only makes sense in the face of hardship. And so I've been thinking a lot about that the last year. I've been thinking about how it's through that unending hope and that amazing grace that movements for equality throughout history have made significant change, that it's always in our biggest challenges that we take our most significant steps forward. And as Mr. Rogers liked to say, quoting his mother, that when he saw something scary on the news, she would tell him to look for the helpers. And for all of the challenges we face, those helpers are everywhere. That grace is everywhere. And that unending hope is everywhere. And that is the foundation. That is the foundation upon which real change can occur. And so some people might call that rose-colored glasses. Some people might think that that's naive, but I can't help but look around in moments of challenge, of trial and tribulation, in moments of significant challenge. I can't help but look around and see so many reasons for hope and to feel incredibly optimistic about our individual and collective capacity to meet the challenges and to deliver meaningful action.
Yeah, and I know it wasn't recently, but of course, I'm so sorry for your loss and what happened to Andy, and he sounds absolutely wonderful. And I think we jumped over Olivia's question, so I'll have Liv go now before.
So far, listening to you talk has been absolutely amazing, hearing all your experiences and your perspective. And I'm also sorry to hear about Andy. I know we've mentioned your book a couple times. How was the process of writing it?
That was a weird coinciding of the notification and my exhaling. It was a process. You know, I obviously had never written a book before. I didn't know how to write a book. I spoke at the Democratic National Convention in 2016, and it was funny. I got off the stage at the convention, and you know, I was the first out trans person to speak at a convention, and it was sort of this moment. And I got off the stage and I walked over to the Delaware delegation, and my good friend and political mentor, a guy named Jack Markell, who was the governor of our state up until about 4 years ago. He served 8 years, 2 terms. He was governor then. And when we sat down, and he was like, okay, well, what's next? Like, you just did this cool thing. What's next? I was like, I have no idea. I'm still processing this. And he said, you should write a book. And I was like, that's ridiculous. How old was I? I was 25 at the time. It's like, yes, I've had some life in my ears, but that's a little ridiculous. Who wants to read my book? And then the next day I got an email from a literary agent who said, have you ever thought about writing a book? And I started working with her. I wrote a proposal and she helped me shop it around to publishers. I was able to begin working with a publisher called Crown at Penguin Random House, which published Barack Obama's books. And with their help, I was able to write the book. I wrote it in 6 months. And the best thing I can compare it to, and what I'm about to compare it to, I've never done, is swimming across the ocean. And this sort of feeling of it's this monumental task, and you just sort of set out. And at a certain point, you've, swam for days and days and days. You lift your head up and you look around and you can't see land anywhere around you. And you have no idea whether you're going in the right direction. You have no idea where you'll land. You have no idea if you'll get there. But the only choice you have is just to keep swimming. That's sort of what it was like writing a book. You don't know where it's going to land. You don't know if you can do it. The interesting thing that I sort of thought about a lot during the writing process was, for fiction, the challenge is coming up with a story. but it's easy because you can control the story to create a through line. With nonfiction, the challenge isn't coming up with the story's there. The challenge is creating a through line, because life doesn't work in that way. Life doesn't, events in life are random and don't follow that through line. And so finding that through line in nonfiction is really challenging. And so trying to figure that out as you're writing it is a really interesting sort of mental exercise. More than anything else, though, writing the book for me was a journey back to hope. I wrote it right after the 2016 election, and I was pretty despondent and dispirited to see literally the worst human being who could possibly get elected president of the United States be elected president of the United States, a man devoid of any redeeming human qualities. I mean, I don't say that as like a partisan. Like, Donald Trump is uniquely devoid of human positive traits. To see someone like that get elected to the highest position of public trust, not just in our country, but in the world, left me pretty demoralized. And so writing the book for me was a journey back to hope, because I was able to reflect on the change that I had seen, and was able to really process that lesson I mentioned before about Amazing Grace, and how it's always in challenge and hardship that hope makes sense and that change is forged.
Yeah, absolutely. And your book is amazing. I love that book. It's a great book. Congratulations on that. And writing it in 6 months seems very quick. So yeah, it must have been a lot of work.
And who would have thought, let me just say this because it's kind of cool and it's unbelievable. The foreword's from the current president of the United States, and one of the blurbs on the back is from the current vice president of the United States. So I want to say that I predicted the Biden-Harris ticket long before it actually happened.
Oh yeah, it was definitely all thanks to your book.
It was the McBride bump. Let's be honest.
For sure. All right, raise your hand. Who is next? Go ahead, Margaret.
My question is, what is your next goal in politics or otherwise?
My next goal is to be the best state senator that I can be for this district. And to fulfill the promises that I made during the course of this campaign. During the course of the campaign, I said I wanted to be the healthcare senator and the paid leave senator. And as the chair of the Senate Health and Social Services Committee, every day I get to work on issues of healthcare. And I am working with my colleagues to draft and then hopefully pass legislation that will ensure that every Delaware worker is afforded paid family and medical leave. Because right now, the reality is that so many Delawareans have to give up their income in the face of illness, that you shouldn't have to sacrifice your savings to start a family. And I believe that one of the lessons of COVID-19 is that no one should have to give up their income in the face of illness. And whether it's COVID or cancer, whether it's a global health crisis or an individual health crisis, the same principle applies. And so my focus is being on the best is being the best state senator I can be, and it's passing real policies that make a real difference in people's lives. And that includes paid family and medical leave for every Delawarean.
Yeah, and I can imagine that your experience in that department with the, paid family leave and the healthcare issue is definitely just very important to you because of what you went through.
Absolutely, and oftentimes we talk about cost in healthcare, and we should be talking about that in the context of insurance. We should be talking about that in the context of deductibles and copays and the cost of care. We have to recognize that the cost of care doesn't end there. It includes people sacrificing their job and their income. And what good is it if you can get care if you also have to give up your shelter or your food or your other prescription drugs in order to do so? And that's the choice that so many people are forced to make when they have to choose between their health and their job. And so I certainly bring that perspective as a caregiver, being a caregiver to Andy, and seeing how difficult it was for us, how we barely kept our head above water, and we had a flexible job. We had a support network in place that could help us through that. And even still, we barely made it through financially and emotionally and his health. Of course, his health ended up going down a path that took his life, but he was able to get care, and we were able to get that care, and it was nearly impossible despite our privilege. And so for me, I think the lesson of so many experiences in my own life has been, yeah, that was hard, but it was still relatively easy compared to other people's.
Definitely. I think Cameron is next. So go ahead, Cameron.
So my question is, out of all the things you've accomplished, what are you most proud of?
That's a good question. Still to this day, the thing that I am most proud of is passing the legislation here in Delaware to protect trans folks from discrimination. Hopefully, I will be able to say soon enough that my proudest moment is passing paid family and medical leave here in Delaware. Personally, my proudest moment was marrying Andy. And when I think back on the trans rights bill, to think back 7 years ago, I stood on the floor of the Delaware State Senate with tears in my eyes and my parents by my side, pleading for my basic rights, looking out on a chamber of people that included no one like me, to now be able to stand on that same floor and to fight for dignity and opportunity for every person as my authentic self. I talk about through lines. That's an unbelievable thing to be able to experience, and a profound coming of the full circle in some ways.
Yeah, for sure. And I was actually wondering, about bringing it back to where it all started when you were a young child, questioning your gender identity and not really having a lot to base that off of. You didn't have a lot of trans role models, or even really any that you could look up to and get your answers from. So is it hard to look back on your childhood and happy memories from your childhood happily because you didn't feel like yourself?
That's a really good question. And it was actually one of the questions that my parents had for me when I first came out. Because I think one of the things that's really challenging for friends and family of an LGBTQ person, period, and maybe particularly trans people, but LGBTQ people writ large, one of the big challenges that their loved ones face is that they have these memories that they cherish, and they find out that the person was in the closet, and they worry, do these memories that meant so much to me, do I sort of have to give up on them because they may not have meant as much to you because you might have been in pain? And, in short, I there was that pain, but I also didn't know anything different. And so the memories that I had are memories that I still cherish. They're experiences that I still draw on. They're friendships and relationships that I still maintain. They're memories that I'm proud of and I'm grateful for. And so, there's certainly, I think particularly early on after you come out, there's certainly an element of, I don't want to say regret, but there is this, well, what if I had been able to have all of my life as my authentic self? Wouldn't that have been more joyful? Wouldn't that have been more meaningful and better? And maybe in some ways, yes. But I am so grateful that I'm trans, and I'm so grateful for the journey that I've been on, that I wouldn't want to risk giving up those experiences, both before I transitioned and after I transitioned, that were informed by the journey I was on in transitioning and when I transitioned. I wouldn't want to trade that for anything. I am blessed for the journey that I've been on, and I am so proud to be trans, and I am so proud that this is the path that I've been granted in my life. And so, in short, it's not hard to look back. Yes, I wish society had moved a little bit faster in some ways, but overall, I'm so just unbelievably grateful for the life that I have and the blessing that I have to be alive and to be able to do things I love, that it's all a wash in the end.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just interesting to hear that perspective as someone who's never experienced it, and just will give me some more insight just to have more empathy in that area. And before we wrap up, I know Kate had something that she wanted to read, so I'm going to pass it over to Kate, who's our advocacy director.
I just first wanted to start off with how inspiring I think you are to many LGBT youth and everyone everywhere. In 2018, I came out as gay, and it was probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. And I think it's the same for a lot of LGBT youth all over. There's no two same experiences. And so I wrote this on what I hope would be similar experiences on behalf of LGBT youth and myself. So, Dear Senator McBride, in 2018, I came out as gay and revealed that I liked girls, which made people see me as different. And I endured bullying both online and in school. It made me ashamed of who I was and the way that I chose to love, the way that I saw as normal. For myself and for others, we have similar experiences of pain. And this pain in 2019 led to a suicide attempt, which was the darkest time in my life. I often think these feelings and experiences are the same for many LGBT youth around the world. With the constant fear of our rights being in jeopardy and the fear of violence, we often struggle with feelings of being invalid and silenced by many. Senator McBride, you have brought hope to many queer and different kids who are not yet to realize there is hope and opportunity for them. You help us to believe and see a better world where gender identity, sexual orientation aren't seen as anything other than who we are. To many LGBT youth in not only Delaware, but from all over the world, we see you as a constant reminder that anything is possible and to expect more for ourselves and others. You make us feel less alone in a world that can sometimes be empty, and give us a platform to be ourselves and who we choose to be 100%. As the first openly transgender woman to be the state senator, you have paved the way for many queer people to sit in office, and you have set the bar to push to have a better future for generations to dream and fight for equality. You helped us to have courage despite hate, love despite discouragement, and strength despite challenges, and self-love despite doubt. Senator McBride, you are a true hero and leader for all who dare to stand out and be different. For not only Delaware, but for the entire world. Change starts here right now. Senator McBride, you have saved the lives of some and changed the lives of many. And for that, we can't express how grateful we not only are for you and for all of the LGBT youth everywhere. Thank you, and never forget, love will always be love.
Wow. First off, thank you. More than anything else, I am so grateful that you are here with us, that you are able to be here with us, that you are yourself, and you have offered me the greatest blessing in one, being able to bear witness to your story and hear from you, and to find hope and inspiration in you and the testimony you bring and the work that you are doing. And so I just want to express my gratitude to you for blazing those trails, for being yourself, for inspiring other young people behind you to know that they can live their truth, dream big dreams, and make real change all at the same time. And anytime my work gets hard, anytime I feel lonely, anytime I get scared, I will think about what you just said, and I will watch this video, and I know I will find the hope and the comfort and the inspiration to continue to move forward. And so I want to thank you for that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You also made me cry.
Making all of us cry, and we're on video.
I just wanted to say on behalf of Generation Activism, thank you for coming and answering our questions, educating us. I know all of us definitely learned a lot about a variety of topics. And thank you to everyone watching at home also. And I think Mallory's going to wrap up the meeting.
Yes, thank you, first of all, to Kate. I know you sent that to me before, but still I get chills when I hear you say that. It's just such a beautiful thing to hear, I think, for everyone. And of course, thank you, Sarah, for coming to this meeting. I definitely, like Mallory said, I learned so much and feel like I got so much more perspective on things that I definitely wasn't as aware of before. So thank you so much for coming and for giving us this opportunity. And thank you for everything Kate said too. Just thank you for being the trailblazer that you are and for just inspiring all the change that you are inspiring and for being your authentic self and choosing, you know, when you were a college student to make that choice and you chose to be yourself and you got what you, both of the things that you wanted, you know, the future that you had hoped for, and you get to do it as yourself. So I think that's just incredible. If anyone has any more comments and questions, now would be the time to raise your hand. Going once, twice. Oh, go ahead, Sean.
I just wanted to say it was an honor to be able to have this meeting with you, and your story is very, very inspirational. So I just wanted to thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? Going once. Go ahead, Liv.
Even though we only talked and answered questions for an hour, I feel like you've really already changed my perspective on life throughout little things you've said.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure.
Thank you.
One more time. I'll go once, twice. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. And Senator McBride, I can actually send you a copy of Kate's speech if you would like. I can have that emailed to you. Yeah, I can do that for sure. And just thank you to everyone at home for watching and tuning in. I'm so glad that I hope everyone enjoyed the meeting and learned as much as we did. If anyone is wondering, our social medias are all generation.activism, and this video will be going up on our YouTube soon. So you can come back and revisit it and learn again and pass it on to anyone that may want to learn more about this topic. Thank you so much for coming, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yep, for anyone who missed it, Sarah's email is in the chat and you can use that to your need. Thank you.
Thank you all. I'll see you all.
Bye. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
We're still live now, so thank you so much for everyone who tuned in at home. Like I said, this video will be up. Thank you for joining. Hope the tech issues were fine on your end. I'm going to stop the live now.